Welcome back to the Poetry Pea and the second part of our one-line haiku extravaganza. I'm Patricia, and I hope you enjoyed the poetry last week, perhaps even figured out some of the techniques used to write them, and have some questions almost ready to send over to me about one-line haiku. And when I say haiku, I mean haiku or senryu in this instance. And indeed, I probably used the word poem throughout the podcast. But you see, I don't want to complicate things yet by splitting the categories. But I figure if you've been listening to me, you all have heard the little series I recorded for you about senryu. If not, do have a listen. Links will be in the show notes. Now, before I get to today's pod, I want to give you a little reminder. There are now 2 types of prompt on YouTube for you to get involved with. The first is the monthly video prompt, which is curated each month by a guest editor, and the poems they choose appear in the Poetry Pea Journal and, of course, on a podcast dedicated to our wildly popular video prompt feature. The other is a new prompt. It's the devilishly demanding 3-word challenge, which you'll find in the shorts on the YouTube page. Should your poem be successful, I will read it out on another short video on YouTube. The submission policy is clear, and it works for both these prompts. Leave your poem in the comments under the video. It's the only way to submit. If it's not there, honestly, it does not exist. Righty-ho. Back to the one-line podcast. At the end of last week's podcast, I posed some questions for you. Have we, with our attempts at one-line poetry, appropriated the Japanese short form? Do English language one-liners conform to our idea of English language 3-line haiku and senryu? Is a one-line haiku a one-line haiku because the poet says it is? Are some of the one-liners we're seeing in our haiku and senryu journals actually poetry? Ooh. Are there techniques to writing these poems? And one I didn't mention was why. Why did we start writing them in the first place? And why have these little gems taken off? Well, today some of those questions are going to be answered. Not all of them, I'll warn you. But I'm going to have to do another podcast in this series, fear not. Because these questions need answering. And of course, there might be more questions that you're going to send me. Techniques, then. We haven't done a technique podcast for ages, but what I remember from doing them in the past is to keep them accessible. No highfalutin theories, and don't have too many techniques in one go. I want you to be able to sit with your notebook and in a relatively short space of time have some work in it that you can continue to hone until you have some fabulous poems. If I make it too simple, tell me and I'll ramp up the difficulty. But this week, I want to concentrate on 5 techniques to enable you to write strong, interesting one-line haiku and senryu. They are what I call speed, circular, truncated, shape, and multiple cuts. Let's have a look at what I mean by speed first. Jim Cation, in an article in Juxta One, says of this technique that when you, as a reader, read this type of poem, the rushing of words past the imagination's editor results in a breathless taking in of the whole, only after which the unexpected sense contained within the imagery asserts itself. Let me read that to you again. The rushing of words past the imagination's editor results in a breathless taking in of the whole, only after which the unexpected sense contained within the imagery asserts itself. You can write them in different ways, and I have some examples for you, as you'd expect. We looked at this one last week. Let's have it again. Only the cry from the stretched shadow down the empty street, harvest moon. Only the cry from the stretched shadow down the empty street, harvest moon. Martin Gottlieb Cohen, from the Poetry Pea Journal, Autumn 2021. Honestly, there's so much I could say about this poem, but in technical terms, the poem is quite long for a contemporary haiku, one line or otherwise. It takes the traditional 17 syllables to tell its tale. Maybe Martin had been reading Ginsberg's American Sentences. Who knows? The words are distinct. The poem is without punctuation, and that means, at least for me, that it can be said in one breath, but more speedily, perhaps, than I would normally read it. That speed adds to the effect of the poem, giving it a tension it might not have over 3 lines, were it possible to write it in 3 lines, which I'm not convinced of. And then there's this, by Alexis Rotella, who, in case you're listening rather than watching the YouTube presentation, has written the poem without any spacing. It goes like this. Starry night, I enter your mirror. Starry night, I enter your mirror. And that, as I said, was by Alexis Rotella, and I took it from the haiku anthology edited by Cor van den Heuvel, the 1986 version. The lack of spacing in the poem, which if I'm honest, I'm not too keen on, particularly because of the letter I. If you're looking at it on the page, it took me a long time to figure out it was the letter I. Anyway, it might just be me being a little bit dim. Anyway, back to the spacing. It can mean that your brain takes a little longer to understand the meaning. Cation says, you take it in, but the sense of it might come to you a little bit later. What do you think? I know there are more examples out there, but for the life of me, I couldn't find them when I was doing the reading, honestly. Maybe you've got some that you can send me. And one last one. Our car never nearer the shimmer of black water on the desert road. Our car never nearer the shimmer of black water on the desert road. And that was by Richard Tyson. It was in the Haiku Pea Pod Series 3, episode 24 in 2020. And, dun dun dun, shortlisted for the Touchstone Awards. My next technique I call circular. You and I have come across this method before. If you were listening last week, I didn't name it, but I illustrated it. And of course, the lovely Carla Ramesh spoke about it on the podcast some time ago. Link in the show notes. I'm going to read you some poems and let you see what I mean. Drenched in birdsong, the forest I become. Drenched in birdsong, the forest I become. Thought it was appropriate to kick this little section off with a poem by Carla Ramesh, which was from The Heron's Nest in June 2025. Now, what can we do with this poem? It's really very interesting. Original. Drenched in birdsong, the forest I become. You can read it in lots of ways. I become drenched in birdsong, the forest. The forest I become, drenched in birdsong. Fascinating technique. And then this one I wrote, nowhere near as good, but it does illustrate the point. Surviving the kindergarten party, one daisy. Surviving the kindergarten party, one daisy. And that was in Frog Pond in 2020. And you could read it like this. One daisy surviving the kindergarten party. The kindergarten party, one daisy surviving. Now, I truly love this technique, and I have lots of examples, but I'll limit myself to just one more. Sea glass, as always, I linger behind. Sea glass, as always, I linger behind. And that's by Frances Angela from the Heron's Nest in December 2025. Again, can be read a number of ways. Original, sea glass, as always, I linger behind. I linger behind sea glass, as always. As always, I linger behind sea glass. Next, we have truncated technique. Gosh, I find this one terribly tricky myself, but very satisfying when I've even been halfway successful. Let me read you a few, and then I'll try and explain what I mean about truncated, although in honesty, you may well have figured it out before I get there. Except the swing bumped by the dog in passing. Except the swing bumped by the dog in passing. Robert Grenier from Sentences in 1978. Starring August Van Gogh as a verb. Starring August Van Gogh as a verb. And that was up by Adrian Bouter from the Heron's Nest in December 2025. Day darkens in the shower. Day darkens in the shower. Bob Boldman from the Haiku Anthology, the 1986 version. So, have you figured it out? What have these poems got in common? Well, there's something missing, isn't there? The poet has left space for your imagination. More space than usual. They are poems that are usually missing the fragment part of the haiku, although I can't decide whether this final one by Bob Boldman is missing the fragment or perhaps a part of the phrase. What do you think? Either way, the poet has left something out of the poem, something to allow our imagination scope to finish the poem. However, word to the wise, if you're trying it out yourself, don't leave so much space that the reader thinks, what on earth is the poem about? I don't know about you, but I've certainly left far too much space in some of the poems I've written. So what I do now is I leave mine a few days to brew, and if when I come back to them I think, what on earth is that about? I know it was not successful. Okie dokie, a quick bit of housekeeping and then back to the poetry. Thank you to everyone who supported the podcast with a membership, or who've bought us a coffee, or given us a shout out in social media, or told their friends about the podcast. All your help is appreciated and helps to keep the show on the road. It's really kind of you. Thank you. Next, I have the technique I've called shape. And as I read these poems to you, think of the direction of travel in the poem. First up, a poem by a poet who's been on the podcast before. I'll put a link in the show notes because he gave a terrific reading. It's Tyrone MacDonald. My loneliness passing through a gas station at night. My loneliness passing through a gas station at night. Tyrone MacDonald. The Heron's Nest, September 2025. Along the clothesline, a Morse code from an alien. Along the clothesline, a Morse code from an alien. Carla Ramesh. From Islet, October 2020. A snowdrop, a snowdrop, a summer. A snowdrop, a snowdrop, a summer. By Joshua St. Clair from the Poetry Pea Journal 123. And oh my goodness, I never tire of reading it. Okay, so did you notice that one way or another, all these images in the poems are flowing in a horizontal line? In Tyrone's poem, my imagination takes me in a car travelling through the petrol station, definitely on the flat, on the horizontal plane. Carla's clothesline. Well, you know, I'm of an age that when I think of a clothesline, it's horizontal and mostly runs from one part of the garden to another. Not like the umbrella-like clotheslines that now live in my garden for those summer days when aliens want to share their Morse code with me. So for me, Carla's poem also mirrors a horizontal plane. And as for Joshua's, it's a timeline, isn't it? One snowdrop after another, and then it's summer. I love snowdrops. They do bloom in my garden towards the end of spring. Is it the same in yours? Anyway, the last technique I'm going to look at today is the technique I've called multiple cuts. It's a technique which does exactly what it says on the tin. The poem has multiple cuts. As Cation said in his article, The Shape of Things to Come, each possible break point, or cut, if you like, yields a different reading. I think lots of poets find this one of the easiest ways to write one-line poems. I could give you lots of examples, but I'll stick to 3 to illustrate my point. Flurries after our argument, the need to tell you. Flurries after our argument, the need to tell you. It's a little bit difficult to read out that one when you do it as it's printed on the line without any punctuation. That's by Jim Cation, anyway, from his book, When I Leave Off. But you could put the cuts, as he says, in different places. So I'm going to cut it after flurries. And it sounds like this. Flurries. After our argument, the need to tell you. Flurries. After our argument, the need to tell you. And now I'm going to cut it after argument, which gives it a different meaning. Flurries after our argument, the need to tell you. Flurries after our argument, the need to tell you. A thousand birds outside a song stuck in my head. A thousand birds outside a song stuck in my head. Could easily be in the speed section of my techniques, but I put it here so we can play with it. And this poem was by Craig Kittner from Poetry Pea Journal, Spring 2021. And I'm going to break it the first time after outside. A thousand birds outside, a song stuck in my head. A thousand birds outside, a song stuck in my head. Actually, there's a helicopter outside at the moment. I wonder if you can hear it. And in the next version, I'm going to break it after song. A thousand birds outside a song, stuck in my head. A thousand birds outside a song, stuck in my head. And lastly, I'm going to put 2 breaks in it after birds and song. 1,000 birds outside a song stuck in my head. And my last example comes from Rowan Beckett, but it's also from the Poetry Pea Journal, this time 223. Summer lingering the spider's carcass. Summer lingering the spider's carcass. Okay, where should we break that this time? So let's put a break after summer. Summer lingering the spider's carcass. Summer lingering the spider's carcass. Or maybe put a break after lingering. Summer lingering the spider's carcass. Summer lingering the spider's carcass. Okay, that's it for the 5 techniques. There are more, of course. But I thought it just might be interesting to focus on these ones, so you can have a bash at playing with them and see what you can create. Let me know if you have any success with the poems that come from this podcast. But now I want to go back to those questions and see how far I've got with them, at least in my own opinion. If you disagree, do let me know, and I'll try and do better. So, have we, with our attempts at one-line poetry, appropriated the Japanese short form? Okay, not answered that one yet, although I do have my suspicions. Do you? Do English language one-liners conform to our idea of English language 3-line haiku and senryu? Not answered that one yet, but there have been hints along the way. Is a one-line haiku a one-line haiku because the poet says it is? Ooh, definitely haven't gone there yet. But I think I might in the not too distant future. Are some of the one-liners we're seeing in our haiku and senryu journals actually poetry? Not done that one yet either, but as per the other question, watch this space. Are there techniques to writing them? Alleluia. Something I have managed to complete. And why? Why did we start writing one-liners in the first place? Okay, another fail. So all in all, if I were to look just at the questions, it would be an epic fail, but hopefully you don't feel that way. But it does look like you and I are going to be off to the track with one-line poems again. I do have a plan, and if I stick to it, the going, as they say, might be a tad rough. Do come back next week and see if I move from this steady trot to a no-holds-barred gallop for the finish. No promises. I might be on horse near a rabbit hole, and we all know what happens then. So next week, more one-liners, more inspiration for your writing, and my goal is to answer more questions than I did this week, which, as you've seen and heard, is not going to be very difficult. But until then, do keep writing. Keep writing one-liners, in fact. And check the show notes for citations if you'd like to continue reading about these one-line poems. Ciao.